the Board of Trade. We continue to be working closely with our stakeholders and officials and the politicians at all levels of government. We've been advocating on behalf of the business community for the programs that we see rolling out, and Friday was an especially robust day for some of the programs that we've been looking for. Access and implementation continues to be high on our agenda to make sure that we don't have businesses that continue to fall through the cracks. And so we continue that work both through our SME Council and our CEO Council, as well as our Talent Council. And then as well as many of our members who are working with us one-on-one. And so we continue that work, but I will tell you that we have started the conversation around what recovery could look like as we move into the spring, looking at what parameters would need to be in place for us to continue to be open for business and in some cases restart business. And so that is the work that we're doing right now. As we do that, we continue to offer benefits to you through our virtual events and programming. So thank you very much to Lynn Ladd from our team for that, as well as our many member volunteers who have stepped up to the plate to provide information and inspiration. We are very grateful for that, but all of our other benefits continue to run that have the ability to support your business, in some cases save you money. Our Chamber Group Insurance Plan continues to run, our SO program. We also have some new programs being launched, including a shipping disc affinity program for you. We're going to be ramping up our Grand and Toy program, and we have a new one launching across Ontario called Barter Pay. So look out for some of the
call. I didn't know you were on the phone, dear.
Sorry, I've just been on.
I'm just going to ask everybody if they can mute until we get the meeting started here.
You want to just sit here, or you want to?
No, I can go there. It's good.
Okay.
Could I ask everyone to put their computer? No, I'm not. Okay, thank you. So today we have a really interesting webinar. Of course, many of us have changed how we're doing business, and that has changed how we are leading our teams. And so we're very excited to present today's webinar. First of all, thank you very much to our partners, Ottawa Citizen and Enbridge Gas, who have made this possible, as well as our partner Media Mall and today's presenting company, which is Kingsford Consulting. So we're very excited to have Graham on board, and just to tell you a little bit about Graham, he is Kingsford's people, process, and organization expert. He started his career as a military engineer in the UK, where he developed expertise in the leadership of change and organizational knowledge and culture. He brings an eclectic mix of engineering, management, and consultancy skills built over 30 years of field experience. He uses these skills to support and coach clients in the implementation of the plans and changes required for growth, and he's the perfect expert panelist for us today. So please welcome Graham.
All right, thank you, Suling, and good morning, everybody. Let me just make sure I can share my screen, and we're off. Okay, so I'm just going to go straight into this, and I'm going to show you an image. So have a look at this image. How does that make you feel? So when I first saw this image, I actually felt quite disoriented. In the background is, you can only just about see it, is some of the construction marvels that we've done. And in the foreground then we have this crystal ball. And it represents to me that the world feels like it's suddenly been turned upside down. Everything we knew has suddenly changed. But that crystal ball also signifies to me that it's a way of looking into the future, and we are wondering what that future is going to look like and be like. But the fact is, it is a crystal ball, and so we don't really actually know what that future is like. But that crystal ball is sitting in our hand. And to me, that represents the future is in our hands. The future is there for us to create. If we're going to create that future, then that is the leadership challenge that we have. So although this is very much talk about leading the virtual team is just part of the overall solution that we're trying to put in place to create that future that we are trying to work towards. So I just want to provide a little bit of context around what I do and how I work. So I have two main tenets to what I do. First of all, I'm looking at improving the way we work. And secondly, I'm looking at transforming the way we work together. So improving the way we work is all to do with looking at process. It's the things we do, the things we put together to make our job and actually deliver what we do. Now, in the knowledge environment, and the knowledge environment is where most people who find themselves virtually working, it's the process made up of people. And so transforming the way we work together is very much about the human interaction, the team dynamics, and part of that is leadership. Now, as we've got into the days of COVID and the challenges that presents, we are now using virtual working as one of the means that to keep business going. And so although that is only one of the methods we're trying to do to keep business going, it's the bit that we're going to focus on here. So as part of that, we're having to work in different ways. Yeah, we're trying to do the same job, but we're having to find different ways of doing it. We've got the same people, but they're behaving differently. They have to behave differently because they're responding to different environmental triggers. So they're in different locations. They have different working environment. We're using different tools. And so we need to make adjustments here. And that is very much what this talk is all about. So as we go through the rest of this presentation, what I'm hopefully going to be providing you with is a practitioner's guide to leading and leadership in the sort of virtual environment. But actually, the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today is just good leadership practice anyway. So it's just being brought particularly into focus because of the challenges of remote working, but it's all good stuff for the future anyway. So let's have a look at what's changed. So this first image here is meant to represent what we're moving from. So there you can see that there's an office environment. It's nice and cozy and warm. People are sitting close together. They can see each other. They can hear each other. Even if they're not communicating directly with each other, they're aware of each other. Everybody's in their personal sort of, in their peripheral vision. People can socialize. The big thing about this environment is that people can spontaneously react to situations. You can ask a question. You can brainstorm spontaneously. There's no real prior planning required to do that. It's a very spontaneous, very fluid environment. And when things are going wrong as well, you can pick them up immediately and deal with it. So what we're moving towards is, or what we have moved towards, is something that looks a little bit more like this. So here we have a co-worker sitting at home. He's all by himself. The co-workers are separated. He's not in sight of hearing of each other. And also at home, he's subjected to different normalized behavior patterns. Often that is the family's behavior patterns. There are distractions, there are constraints. Quite often now, especially now, we find that there's family members also working at home who are sort of competing in some ways. And on top of that, you know, we've got COVID and the coronavirus and the measures that we're putting in place. And all of that is creating additional uncertainty. We've got worries, things like pay, security, safety, control, you know, the virus itself. And all that leads to some sort of stress, which is impacting that home worker as well. So this provides us with a bit of a leadership challenge. And that is what we're trying to cope with. We're trying to recreate as far as we can that working environment that we can see in that image on the left, while at the same time dealing with the reality of somebody sitting by themselves on the right. So I'm just going to take a quick look at what leadership is. So what I should say is that a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today are my simplified models of how the world works. As I said, this is all part of my leadership playbook. And so what I've got here is three simple models that I use to keep reminding myself about what leadership is all about. And this first one is known as the rock and the bird. It's a pretty old story. I don't know quite where I learned it from, but it's a way of trying to differentiate or distinguish between what leadership is and what management is. So imagine there's a target on the floor. That's the target you can see there. And imagine that I have a rock, and I want to get that rock into the center of the target. So the first time I throw it, it goes wide. The second time I throw it, it's somewhere within one of those circles. The third time I throw it, it's somewhere near the center. If I throw that rock often enough, I will be able to get it into the center of that circle absolutely every time, once I learn about the nature of the weight and the laws of physics and all that sort of stuff. Now, I want to get that bird into the center of the circle. So I pick up the bird, and with my new rock throwing skills, I sort of launch the bird gently at the circle. And where does the bird go? Well, it goes absolutely anywhere it wants to go. It doesn't necessarily go towards the center of the circle. So I've got a fundamentally different challenge here. If I want that bird to go into the center of the circle, I've got to get inside its head. I've got to work out how to get it there, how to make it want to go there. And that is the leadership challenge. So what I discern is that that bird likes a nice juicy worm. So if I put a juicy worm in the center of that circle, let the bird go, it will just go there all by itself. Okay, no throwing involved. So to me, that is what differentiates between leadership and management. With leadership, I am trying to inspire the bird to achieve or do what I want it to do. With management, it's very much like throwing the rock at the center of the circle. So leadership to me is all about influencing the people around us to achieve something, to do something. So the second model I want to show you is that this leadership is multi-directional. Now, we often think of, when we use the word leader, that it's sort of a hierarchical thing, it's top down, but it's not. Leadership can operate in all sorts of directions. Yes, somebody who's in charge of the team and the organization does have to provide leadership and direction, but anybody in the organization can do it. You can influence the people, your peers. You can also influence your boss or your superiors. So leadership has got to be recognized to operate in all different directions. The other thing about leadership is that it's situational. And this is a very important part. You have to adjust your leadership style depending on what type of situation you'll find yourself in. So first of all, the first rule of leadership is lead yourself. So you've got to look after yourself, you've got to lead yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Then there's a one-on-one leadership, which is where you are, as the name says, you're interacting one-on-one with somebody. Leading a team is different because what you're doing there is you're trying to facilitate the team to become self-sufficient, self-supporting, and actually functional. And then finally is leading the organization, where you're trying to set a course for the whole organization. And yes, they're all different types of leadership, but they're all very, very different. But they all have to happen at the same time. So what? So if we look at the rock and the bird, that is all about inspiring. It's all about attending to people's psychological needs, and it's all about leading by good example. The multi-directional stuff is all to do with getting, it's thinking team, getting more members of your team actually involved in the day-to-day leadership challenge. And the situational stuff, somebody needs to be doing all of those things at all times in the organization. But it doesn't all have to be you if you are the boss. So that's the leadership challenge. What I want to do now is just spend a few minutes looking at what it is we're leading. And actually, we're leading our fellow human beings. So I want to just sort of explain a very, very simple model I have of the human mind and the human brain. They do say that if the brain was simple enough to understand, we'd be too dumb to understand it. So this is a really simplistic model. However, it is built on some fairly solid research. So I split it down into 3 layers. First of all is the what's known as the neocortex. So this is the big frontal sort of lobe stuff. This is where we do a lot of our thinking. It's our rational, logical side. When we do our work, it's what we're using. You're probably using this part of your mind, your brain now, to make sense of what I'm talking to you about. And compared with the other parts of your brain, this is actually a fairly slow bit of your mind, but it's very, very conscious and deliberate. It's also known as the lying brain because this is where we can do planning and plotting and scheming as well. So next comes the mammal or the emotional brain, sometimes known as the limbic brain. And this is where we register feeling. How are you feeling? This is where you'll get the answer to that question. It's where we provide the physical reactions to how we're feeling, and we recognize those things as body language. And it's a very quick and automatic. The emotional part of our brain is filled with all sorts of automatic routines to help us just make sense of things, to understand what's going on and react to them very, very, very quickly. The final part there is what's known as the reptile brain. This is where our base instincts are. It's where things like aggression are, protection. And I'm not really going to talk about that much at all in here. But between the emotional and the base instincts are the familiar freeze, fight, flight, and fight things. When we start getting emotional and they start getting too much, we start heading towards those base instincts. Those 3 things kick in: the freeze, the flight, and the fight. Freeze is where you just want to sort of curl up into a ball and do nothing. Flight is you just want to run away, and fight is where you find those feelings of anger. But all 3 of those types of thinking are in operation at all time. Yeah, you'll constantly be tripping through. You'll have a thought. It'll stimulate an emotional thought. An emotional thought will then trigger another actual conscious thought. So human beings are emotional animals, and that is key to leading a team and being very aware of. And again, when we are in an environment where everyone's around us, we're automatically picking up on these signals. But in a virtual working environment, we've got to look for these a little bit more carefully. So we're emotional animals, and so most of our understanding of the world and our immediate response to it happens here at the emotional level. We also use emotions in our decision making. We like to think that we're making decisions at that sort of logical level. And sure, we take in a lot of information and that we use to make decisions. But ultimately, we need an emotional trigger before we will finally make a decision. You know, if you're going to go and buy a suit, yeah, the salesperson said, "Oh, you'll look very good in that." Or you're going to go and buy a car, they'll say, "Oh, you'll really enjoy buying that car or driving that car." It's something that just gives you that little bit of emotional push before you actually make the final decision. But what we find is that if people are emotionally challenged, if they're stuck at that emotional level, they start making less and less optimal decisions, and that can have business consequences. And one thing that there's been a lot of study on this, and one thing that is, so people who are short of money, for instance, they make worse and worse financial decisions. People who are short of time, and that is most of us now because we put such a premium on time, we make worse and worse time management decisions. So I want to talk a little bit about motivation here. We all like to think that we all want to work at that sort of logical mind to logical mind. That's where we problem solve, and that's where we come up with our great ideas. And when we're working there, we get into this sort of state of flow, and it feels good. And so that sends a message down to the emotional level. It makes us feel good. It releases serotonin and dopamine, and it may sort of result in a smile happening. And that makes us feel good, and it takes us back up to that logical level, and we can work even better and faster. But the thing is, that can only happen if everything is working okay at this emotional level. So in times of uncertainty, like we have now, and maybe for some of our employees who are working at home, the emotional mind becomes increasingly dominant in our thinking and our action. We become more and more focused on our security and our safety, and I mean both physical and psychological, both for ourselves and our family. As I mentioned before, the mind has got a whole plethora of automated responses in there, which are there to keep us safe. But now they're going into overload because they're all running all the time. And that mass of automated responses going on all the time can lead us to start feeling overwhelmed. So if people are struggling at that emotional level or they're stuck there, there's one thing you can't do. You can't resolve it by logical, reasoned discussion. So don't even try it. The important thing there is to recognize that people are stuck at that emotional level. And that is where you get the relevance of motivation comes from. People can start looking unmotivated. They are unmotivated because they're focused on other things. So this is the myth. You cannot motivate anybody. Motivation comes from within, but your role as a leader is to inspire people, is to help them find their inner motivation and hopefully lift them out of that area of emotional stuckness and then get them back on the road to logical, rational thinking. So you probably heard the saying, music calms the savage beast. And so I find that music is a great mechanism for sort of helping me escape that emotional thing. And different types of music actually get me into different elements of that logical thinking, depending on what I want to think about and do. So I'm going to tell you about this thing called ICU. Now, this is a little tool I learned many, many years ago, and I found it very, very useful. It's a Zulu greeting, and it says, I see you. Now, we are very used to meeting somebody, saying, hello, how are you? Great, and then moving on. Now, that is a little bit of an emotional check-in, which is great. What I'm suggesting now is that we maybe spend a little bit more time rather than just doing a superficial greeting, but to actually say or think, I see you. Now, the whole idea of I see you is that I'm going to take a slightly deeper look. I'm just going to look beyond that superficial greeting, and I'm going to take a look. How are you looking? How are you acting? How are you feeling? I am seeing you for what's in there. And it might take a few seconds to do that. And so I recommend that whenever you start a conversation, that you spend a few minutes just taking a deeper look. And if you identify a solution or an issue at the emotional level, spend a little bit of time there having a chat about it. Now, the point here is that not all problems need a solution. Sometimes you just need to give people a good listening to, but it's the airing of the problem that can help. Obviously, some people might have bigger issues, and that might be beyond your ability or my ability to help them. But at least it's acknowledged. At least people can acknowledge that they have an issue that needs dealing with. But the important thing is that if they are stuck there, there is no way that you can force them to get back into that logical, rational thinking without addressing that first. So whenever you start a conversation, even if you don't actually say the words, I see you, just think it, just spend a couple of minutes with them, trying to make sure that they're good. And then you can get onto that logical stuff. The alternative is, if you try to push them too hard, you put even more pressure on them, they start going downwards in that losing. They go into that freeze, the flight, they might demonstrate anger, and the base instincts will take over. So there's another element that we human beings need for our emotional wellness, and it's belonging and connection. We all feel the need to belong to something, whether it's family, community, faith, interest, or even a company. And we all feel that we need to be connected. Now, the internet these days provides an incredible opportunity for people to be connected. And there is so much opportunity that all these different social groupings are pulling and competing for people's attention. Now, nature abhors a vacuum, and if people don't find a connection in belonging in one place, they will find it somewhere else. And so one of our leadership challenges is to help people maintain that sense of belonging to the organization, to the company. And we can do that by ensuring that we stay connected with them. And these days we're using the word physical and social distancing. I think social distancing is probably the official term for it, but certainly locally we're trying to use the word physical distancing. And it's an important distinction to make. You know, absolutely, we are keeping physically distant. But as we are maintaining that physical distance, it is very important that we do maintain social connection and help people feel that they still belong to the organization. So this next slide was as a result of a survey that was done in the US in 2019. So this was before COVID-19 was even on the radar. And it was a survey of virtual workers in the US. And they were asked, what is the main concern that they have, or the main issue they have as remote workers? And so this is the numbers you see on the left-hand side are the percentages of the total respondents and what they saw as their main issue. And the biggest one, 22% of respondents said that actually getting unplugged was the biggest problem they had. You know, they disappeared into their little office at home and they started working and they kept working. And there was nobody there to sort of say, hey, time to stop working now. And also some of the underlying causes of this was because there was lack of clarity as to what they were supposed to be doing. They tended to do slightly more than was necessary. But it's the next two ones that are interesting. 19% said loneliness was their biggest issue. And 17% said collaboration and communication. And that is the ability to collaborate and the ability to communicate with their co-workers. That was the biggest issue they were feeling there. After that was distractions and a few other bits and pieces. So as leaders, those are still there. And those are issues that we do need to try and work with as we go ahead. But now in 2020, with COVID, we've got a whole load of other issues to try and work with as well. That brings me on to this. So as human beings, we like to have an understanding of the world. We like to know what is solid, what is certain. We like to know that the ground that we walk on is solid and it's not going to move. We like to know that the sun's going to come up every day and go down, and the moon's going to do what it does, and the stars are where we last saw them. We're constantly looking for patterns, and we spent a lot of time as a species looking for patterns in the sky and joining the dots. So we like to have certainty, and we like to have a model of the world. Now, over the last few weeks, there's a word I've been hearing a lot, and it's uncertainty. And I've used it several times in this presentation already. And the thing about uncertainty is that it has a bit of an insidious effect on us. And the simple fact is that as human beings, we just don't like uncertainty. In fact, we're hardwired to be afraid of uncertainty and to try and do something about it. So if we didn't have a fear of uncertainty, and we just blindly went off and did absolutely anything, we'd have probably taken ourselves out of the gene pool quite a long time ago. So we try to make sense. As soon as we get that sense of uncertainty, like we're doing right now, we go into overdrive. We're trying to make sense of the world around us. We're looking for patterns. We're joining the dots. We are trying to find certainty. And the way we do it is by doing research. And that sounds great. And we call on our trusted sources to do that. And when I say trusted sources, I mean we go to things like friends and family, we go to our networks, we go to those connections and those things we belong to, things that we have learned to be connected to and to trusted. The thing is, we were not applying sufficient, certainly these days, we're not applying sufficient critical thinking to those sources. And we're maybe not too discerning as well about where we get that information from. But from an individual perspective, it doesn't really matter. What we're finding out doesn't need to be rational, it just needs to be believable. And there is a lot of dodgy information out there that's being put across in a very confident approach. And once we have that, we re-establish certainty and we feel grounded again. And once we feel grounded again, we're okay, we're good to keep going. So this provides a big opportunity for us as leaders, is to start helping and assisting those around us to apply a little bit more critical thinking. Sure, there's a lot we don't know, but be open about it. We don't know this, we don't know that. But what we do know, point people to this ideal of a single source of truth. But helping people avoid misleading and wrong information is a crucial part of what we need to go going forward. So getting back to leadership, I'm going to look at four areas, and this is what the things we saw on that slide earlier on. So I'm going to start with leading me, and this is I'm going to give you a bit of a personal checklist here, and then as we start looking at leading someone else, leading the team, leading the organization, that's going to be a bit of a summary of the sort of things we can do when looking at those other things. Okay, so leading me. So there's a very important member of the team that you're a part of, and that is you. If you are going to lead the team, you've got to be in a good place to lead. It's not about putting yourself first. It's not about being selfish. It's ensuring that you're in the best possible place to do what it is that you have to do. Every team needs some sort of leadership. It needs some sort of direction. So what I'm suggesting here is that you take a look in the virtual mirror and you ask yourself some leadership self-check questions. And I'm just going to go through those quickly with you now. It's the, I call it the oxygen mask principle. You know, when you're on an aircraft, should there be an issue, the advice is put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting other people. So there's 7 points that you can check. The first one is ask yourself, as you look in that virtual mirror, how am I feeling? So everybody is reacting differently to this situation. Some people are taking it very much in their stride. Some people are going into survival mode and going into this, this freeze, flight and fight mode. But whatever it is you're doing, it's okay. It is okay not to feel okay. But the important thing is to be able to recognize it. And the other important thing is to not be defined by those feelings. And by that I mean, you know, you could say, I am angry, as opposed to, I am feeling angry. If you are angry, you're defined by it. But if you're saying, I'm feeling angry, then, okay, what's making me feel angry? How can I deal with it? It sounds subtle, but it is actually quite a significant tool to doing something about that. But once you recognize that how you're feeling, you can do something about it. And it's that oxygen mask moment. And maybe you've just got to stand back, take a breath, you know, just look around you. And one important question, and I'll keep coming back to this, is who can help? Next thing to ask yourself is, what am I focused on? In a time of uncertainty, we become very much focused on the here and now, because that's where the issues are. There's a whole load of new stuff happening. There's new information. We're uncertain about what's going on. We're focused on the here and now. And we try to make sense of the world based on our past experience. And we try to solve those problems based on our past experience. What's tried and tested. The thing is, the world is changing rapidly, and we may be missing important stuff. So again, it's important to stand back from the situation. And this is where the team can really come in, bring in diversity, different perceptions, different thinkers, different sources, bring in the people around you. This is where we as consultants can help as well, because we bring in very different perspectives as well. So bring in people that can help you understand the problem in a way that maybe is not part of your norm. The next thing is the opposable mind. Now, this is based on a statement by Scott Fitzgerald, and he said that a sign of intelligence was the ability to hold 2 seemingly opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still be able to function. And the opposable mind was actually a book written on that theme a few years ago. And in these days of coronavirus or in COVID-19, we find ourselves with lots of seemingly opposing requirements. You know, I've got to keep the company going, but I've got to keep everybody separated. I've got to plan for the future, but I've got to sort out the here and now. There's lots and lots of opposing ideas that we have to balance out as we go through. And this is mentally challenging. It is mentally hard work to do it. It needs new thinking. It needs exercising parts of the brain that you don't normally exercise. It needs creative thinking. So again, this is a great opportunity to bring in your team, bring in somebody else's team. It's the diversity of thinking. But it is also these opposing requirements, challenges that we have, that we are building opportunities in the future. This is where we are creating the future. A lot of the solutions and the innovations that we're putting in now are as a result of these competing requirements. These are what will become our new normal in the days, weeks, months, years ahead. Next, have courage. Leadership isn't easy. Yeah, it's rewarding, but it certainly isn't easy at all. And the definition I use of courage is it's being afraid, or it's being scared, but going ahead and doing it anyway. And as I look at some of our clients and some of the companies out there, I'm seeing a lot of courageous leadership out there. And it's great to see people really, really sort of stepping up to the challenges they're facing. But remember, as a leadership, by definition, you're not alone. If you are leading somebody, you have people that you are leading. You have a team around you. So let them play their part. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has abilities. Let the team demonstrate some more, or use some of their leadership for whatever the relevant parts are. But the thing is about courage is show courage to your team. And one thing you'll find is that courage, if you demonstrate it, if you lead by good example, courage is contagious. And the team around you will start demonstrating it too. Next thing you should check on is, where am I going? As I've said, we're creating the future, and it's important that we never lose sight of that. We created the world that we're in now, and we're creating our way out of it as well. So keep an eye on that future. We will get there, but the question is, whose future are we going to end up in? Is it the one that we are creating, or is it somebody else's? I mean, right now we are in a swamp. We have to take it one step at a time, maybe go sideways, maybe go backwards, but never lose sight of the future. We will come out of this. Next is, who am I? Every good leader knows themselves. They know their strengths and their challenges. And the important thing to remember here is that we are all merely human. None of us are superhuman. I mean, I know some of us can do almost superhuman things, but we are merely human. We can do a lot, but we can't do everything. And that leads us on to the final thing of who can help. There's always people around us who can help us. And quite often, we get very used to the idea of trying to do things by ourselves, sort things out, the DIY approach. But make use of the people around you. Share your responsibilities with the team. Balance strengths and weaknesses, yours and theirs. So this is, I've got three more or less summary slides here. So the one-to-one leadership is, make sure that you're chatting one-to-one. Everybody in your company at some point, if they're virtually working, they need to have these one-to-one conversations with somebody. It doesn't have to be you, it just should be somebody. Encourage people to learn to see, especially when you're looking at somebody on a two-dimensional screen, look a little bit beyond, excuse me, what you see. Establish and maintain that belonging and connection, and counter the uncertainty. Try and find that elusive single source of truth. When you're looking at a team, think team, have regular check-ins, pulse rhythm point. People like certainty, they like regularity. If you have a meeting on a Monday morning, it's something that everybody can look forward to. It's a reference point. We have meals several times a day. They're important parts of our life. Yes, we like the ability to be flexible, but we also like the routine and the ability to have those reference points throughout our week. It has a very powerful psychological effect. Set clear expectations. Let people know what's expected of them, not just in terms of the work, but in terms of the way they're expected to behave with each other, look after each other. Encourage discussion, questioning, airing of concerns, looking out for each other. And finally, organizational, excuse me, I just got to losing my voice. The organizational leadership. The point to running a boat is a good model I like to use for this. So it's your boat, it's your crew. Yeah, everybody's in the same physical boat. They've all got different jobs to do, but you're all on the same sea. You know, when it's rough, you all feel it together. When it's calm, you all feel it together. But the question as person in charge of that boat is, what course are you going to set? Where are you going to go? You know, how are you going to take advantage of the environment you find yourself in? How are you going to sort of look at the other boats around you and take advantage of it? How are you going to solve those problems for the future? So in terms of your remote workforce, it's very important that you share that vision and the company direction. Give people perspective. If they don't know what the vision is and where you're going, they will invent something of themselves. They will come up with their own understanding of the world. So it's important that as far as possible, give people clarity. Let everyone know how they fit in. Let everyone know the value that they have to the organization. And let everybody know how you're progressing. Are we actually getting there? When you're on a flat sea, you can go for miles and miles and miles, and it doesn't seem like you're getting anywhere. Let them know how you're progressing. And then check, can they feel it? Can they feel this leadership? And how do you know? And that comes back to those one-on-one conversations and the team discussions. So I just want to finish off by having a quick look at the future of remote working. So at the moment, although remote working is a normal thing for many people, for many of us, it's a temporary thing. But it could actually become the new normal. Everybody can do it for a short amount of time, but I guess for many people, the novelty of it is starting to wear off. It isn't new, and there is a lot of good practice out there. I wouldn't say necessarily it's good to focus on best practice, but there's a lot of good practice out there because everybody, company is different. Certainly remote working is not for everybody and it's not for every company, but there might be a lot of opportunities out there. And certainly remote working does provide a lot of opportunities. And it's worth thinking about this now and saying, hey, do we want to continue this? Or do we want to go back to working in our office environment afterwards? So some of the opportunities that it provides is it takes account of the fact that there's no such thing as an average human being. You know, 50% of the population is male and 50% of the population is female. So what does that make the average human being? It's a bit of a nonsense. And we can go into lots of different elements of that. So a lot of work environments actually do cater for the average human being, which is a bit of a nonsense in itself. So working from home allows people to create the working environment that is actually optimal from them. Flexible working, less commuting. Those things have been proven to demonstrate that people can actually be a lot more productive when given a lot more control over how and when they work. And that means less stress. There's also, because of remote working, the potential for greater diversity. You can work with people around the world. It just becomes a normal part for how you work. So that gives us a lot of opportunity for better problem understanding and solving. So there are a few challenges we need to overcome. Certainly technical. Right now, there's information coming out of the security industry that hackers and people doing phishing scams, that's massively increasing at the moment, taking advantage of some of the relaxed security arrangements people are putting in place so that we can actually work from home. So there's technical, and a lot of the tools we're using as well are not quite up to scratch where we need them. Zoom was a good example of that. And they are very, very recently up to their game as a result of the massive take-up on the Zoom platform. We've got cultural things. People expect to work in a particular way, and now we are asking them to work in a different way. And our management and leadership practices will need to change as well. So if you go to places like Stockholm, you know, roughly a third of the population regularly works from home. It's where their prime place of work, and up to 2/3 work occasionally. In the US, it's 5%. So there are places in the world where remote working works for them, and it's a very productive way. Anyway, on that, I would I bring my presentation to a close, and so I just want to sort of say, you know, the future is there for us to create. Future's in our hands. And creating that future is our leadership challenge. So thank you very much for your time. There's my email address. I'd love to hear from anybody about the issues and the success you're having as remote teams. Just call me. And also a quick plug for KCL. we are running a free rebound program for management teams that want to come out of this and ahead of the curve. So please do just give us a call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Graham. Before we get into the Q&A session, I'd like Graham to have a chance to relax his voice for a moment or two. And I just want to tell you about a couple of webinars that we have coming up. On Thursday of this week, Andrea Greenhouse from Vision to Voice Communications is going to lead a webinar about communicating with your team and how to keep them engaged. Next week on the 28th, we're going to have a team from Stratford managers talking about the 5 stages of disaster recovery. And on the 30th, we're going to have a special inspirational webinar where we will chat with Carla Briones, Steve Cody, and Suling Ching about managing an organization and leading an organization during this incredibly strange time that we are living through together. I also want to let everybody know that we're starting a second webinar series. It's going to begin on Wednesday, May the 6th, and it will be called Wellness Wednesdays. The Ottawa Board of Trade is absolutely committed to the idea that in order to restart Ottawa's economy, we have to be very careful to keep our population healthy and well. So our very first Wellness Wednesday webinar at 1 p.m. is going to feature the great folks at St. John's Ambulance, and they are going to talk to us about mental health first aid. So that is a very, very important topic, and I am personally looking forward to that one a great deal. I'd like to thank our sponsors today. As a not-for-profit, the Ottawa Board of Trade relies on our sponsors to help us provide educational events such as this. So I'd like to say thank you once again to the Ottawa Citizen and to Enbridge Gas and to our media sponsor, Media Mall Marketing, and of course to Kingsford Consulting and Graham Birkenhead and his partner in crime, Andrew Penny, for offering your time and to help us out today by talking about leading a virtual team. So I think we're ready to go into the questions, but I'm going to hijack the questions because I have one for Graham. When you were talking about motivation, yes, and you were talking about some of those basic primal emotions that can interfere with finding your own motivation, if you were a team leader and you had somebody that, you know, said, hey, I can't get it together, I'm having a hard time finding my mojo, how would you lead them through that?
It's it very much depends. Yeah, wow. Yes. So it very much depends on the individual you're talking to. As I said, the important thing is to give them time and space, and to, I suppose, let them know that you are going to be sympathetic to their needs, and you know, remove that sense of pressure that you are going to ask them immediately to get on with the job and get this done and hit this deadline. I have found when talking to people in this situation that that just giving them the opportunity to talk and air what is on their mind. Quite often people have not had the opportunity to articulate or even think about it, what they're going through in a particular structured way. So encouraging them to physically talk it out and get it out, and it might be confused and all over the place, that in itself can help people. And once people start talking about it, it's like when you've got a list of things to do. And you know, if you just leave it in your head, it starts becoming overwhelming. And if you start writing it out, it's like getting it out there. It makes you feel better. So that's an important first step, I would guess, is encouraging people just to talk about it. And you might need to take a little while to get them to trust you, depending on how well you know them, before they will start opening up. But it's about creating a non-threatening environment. Maybe you have to give a little to get a lot from them, but you know, certainly remove that threat of having to get into the logical mind stuff and keep them there. There are times, and I've come across it, where it's just way beyond whatever's going on in somebody's head is just way beyond my ability as a leader and a manager to deal with it. And those are times when you can refer people to sort of coaches who are more expert at this.
Well, I have to say that one slide really resonated with me, because in the first couple of days when this was all beginning, I had zero ability to focus and concentrate, because literally all I wanted to do was buy food and stock the house and make sure that people were healthy and safe. And I could not concentrate or focus on anything else. Yeah. And fortunately, Suling does create that environment of being able to talk freely and openly, and she's very concerned about how we're feeling, so we've worked through that. But boy, when you were talking about that slide, it was like ding ding ding, that's me.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
And it's interesting what you were saying about going out and buying food and whatever, and that's one of the things we do to try and restore a semblance. I mean, we need food to sort of survive, but going and buying food and getting in stocks, it's one of those things we use to restore that sense of having control over our lives.
Absolutely.
Getting grounded again. Yes.
Thank you. So questions for Graham now that I've finished hogging his time. Would anybody else like to ask about a particular situation, or just general questions about leading virtual teams? Oh, people are making it easy on you this morning, Graham. Either that or you answered everyone's questions exactly. Just in case someone's typing into the chat box for a question, we'll just give it a minute or two. I did think it was a great idea for you to talk about that whole concept of the oxygen mask principle. I'm a big believer in that a leader, whether it's in the family or whether it's just the team or whether it's an entire organization, you have to look after yourself. You have to care for yourself on a physical and an emotional and a spiritual, every single level. If you don't look after yourself, you're no good to anybody else. That's the way I look at it. Anyway.
And one thing I have seen is people who are running teams, companies, whatever they do have this natural tendency to put everyone first. Their level of care for the people that work for them is outstanding. But it comes at a price. And that's just a reminder that yes, as you just said, you do have to look after yourself. You can maintain that level of effort for a short period of time, but if you're in this for the long haul, you need to be in a good place to lead.
Absolutely. So do we have any other questions for Graham today? So I will remind everybody that we have been recording today's webinar, and it will be up on our website within about 48 hours. We will send it out to everyone who's registered today. And Graham, can we share your slide deck as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, so we'll send the slide deck out at the same time. And Graham's contact information is in the last slide. So if you do have a question, you're too shy to ask it now, or if it suddenly occurs to you later, please, he is more than happy to take your calls. Please reach out to him and take advantage of his offer to give you some guidance or assistance. All right, everybody, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. And again, special thanks to Kingsford Consulting, both Graham Birkenhead and his partner, Andrew Penny, for helping us out today. That was fantastic. Thank you, Graham. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.